You kneel in your armor, your sword rests across your knees. Outside, someone is waiting for you to walk out that door, and you already know what they expect. You are not afraid of dying, you are afraid of how you will be remembered. For nearly 700 years, that single fear shaped one of the most disciplined warrior classes in human history, not the fear of death, the fear of shame. Today, you might feel your stomach drop over a typo in an email, a joke that landed wrong, a mistake your coworkers saw, small stuff, compared to what was coming for you, but the feeling is the same one that built an entire code of honor in feudal Japan, and pushed it further than almost any culture in history has ever taken it. Let's go back to the source of that feeling. The samurai emerged around the 9th century as a warrior class serving regional lords in Japan. At first, they were little more than hired protection for wealthy landowners. By the 1100s, they had become the backbone of political power itself, fighting in the civil wars that decided who would rule the country. Their code of conduct eventually became known as bushido, which translates roughly to the way of the warrior. It was not written down as one single rulebook, handed out and memorized. It developed slowly, over hundreds of years, through practice, through war, through generations of warriors watching how their fathers lived and died. Historian Eiko Ikegami studied this development closely in her book The Taming of the Samurai, published in 1995. Her research traced how Japan's warrior culture built its identity around something anthropologists call honor culture. In an honor culture, your worth isn't just about what you do in private, it's about what other people believe about you in public. Reputation becomes a kind of currency, spendable, stealable, and impossible to fully replace. Once it's gone, lose it, and you lose everything, even if your body is still standing right in front of everyone. That's a strange idea to sit with. Can you imagine a world where being seen as dishonorable was worse than being killed? For the samurai, it wasn't just imaginable, it was daily reality, built into the smallest interactions. Consider the concept of giri. Giri is often translated into English as duty or obligation, but that translation undersells it badly. Giri was a binding social debt, owed to your lord, your family, and your ancestors. It didn't come with paperwork. It came with the unspoken understanding that failing to repay it would follow you for the rest of your life. Breaking giri didn't just embarrass you personally, it damaged the people connected to you, sometimes for generations. A samurai who acted in cowardice didn't just ruin his own name, he stained his family's name in the historical record, a stain that could outlive him by centuries. Now picture the alternative most people assume when they imagine samurai, warriors who simply loved fighting, loved war, loved the sword above all else. That's the Hollywood version, built for movie screens and video games. The real picture, according to historian Karl Friday, who has spent decades researching medieval Japanese warfare, is more complicated and, honestly, more interesting. Friday's research shows that samurai warfare was often bureaucratic, political, and cautious. Warriors weighed risk carefully, because losing a battle could cost their entire family its land and status. They were not reckless daredevils charging blindly into danger. What made them terrifying to their enemies wasn't blind aggression, it was the fact that they had nothing left to lose except their name, and a warrior with nothing to lose is the most dangerous kind there is. This is where the idea of seppuku enters the picture. Seppuku, sometimes called by the harsher term harakiri in the West, was a ritual form of suicide by disembowelment, performed according to strict, almost theatrical etiquette. There was a proper blade, a proper posture, sometimes a second warrior standing by, ready to end the pain quickly once the ritual had been performed correctly. It sounds almost impossible to comprehend from the outside looking in, but within the internal logic of the samurai's world, it made complete sense. If your honor was destroyed beyond repair, through defeat, betrayal, or failure to protect your lord, seppuku was a way to reclaim what shame had taken from you. Dying well, on your own terms, following the proper ritual precisely, could restore a name that failure had ruined. Let's reconstruct a scene, so you can actually picture what this felt like from the inside. You are a samurai in the 1300s, serving a lord who has just lost a critical battle. Your lord is dead, you survived. In most cultures throughout history, surviving a lost battle is simply what happens. You live to fight another day, and nobody thinks twice about it. But in your world, survival without your lord raises a terrible, unavoidable question. Did you fail to protect him when it mattered most? Did you flee when you should have stood and died at his side? Your household is watching you, right now, in this exact moment. Your children will inherit whatever answer you give to that question. Whether you ever speak it out loud or not, neighbors will remember, rival clans will remember, the story will be told for generations, and you have almost no control over which version survives. Historian Ivan Morris explored this exact tension in his book The Nobility of Failure, published in 1975. Morris studied a recurring figure across Japanese history, the tragic hero, remembered not for winning, but for the sincerity of his failure. Morris found that Japanese culture often celebrated warriors who died honorably in a losing cause more than those who won through compromise, trickery, or political maneuvering. Losing wasn't the disgrace, losing badly, or losing without dignity, was the real disgrace. This is where bushido gets genuinely counterintuitive for a modern viewer like you. You might assume a warrior culture would worship winning above everything else, the way modern sports culture often does. The samurai code frequently did the opposite. It elevated how you lost as more important than whether you won in the first place. There's a text that captures this philosophy directly, in the samurai's own words rather than a historian's summary. It's called the Hagakure, compiled in the early 1700s from the teachings of a former samurai named Yamamoto Tsunetomo. By that point, Japan had entered a long era of relative peace, and many samurai of Tsunetomo's generation had never actually fought in a real battle. They trained constantly for a war that never came. Tsunetomo worried that the old warrior spirit was fading into ceremony and paperwork. His most famous line, paraphrased across centuries of translation, essentially instructs the reader to accept death every single morning before doing anything else that day, not because death itself was desirable, because a warrior who had already made peace with dying couldn't be controlled by fear, couldn't be threatened, couldn't be bought. Here's the twist most people don't expect when they first learn this history. The Hagakure wasn't written during the height of samurai warfare, in the chaos of real battlefields. It was written during peacetime, by a man who had never seen serious combat himself, mourning the loss of a culture he feared was quietly disappearing around him. In other words, one of the most famous texts on samurai honor is partly a nostalgic reconstruction, written after the true golden age of the samurai had already ended. That changes the story slightly, doesn't it? Much of what people today imagine as the ancient samurai code was actually formalized, romanticized, and tightened during a period when samurai were becoming bureaucrats and administrators rather than warriors on an actual battlefield. The rules got stricter as the real fighting got rarer. Honor became more important precisely because there were fewer genuine opportunities left to prove it through combat. The less samurai actually fought, the more elaborate the rituals around honor became. That pattern might sound strangely familiar to you. You can even see it in how children of samurai families were raised. Discipline began early, sometimes as young as 5 or 6 years old. Boys were taught composure before they were taught combat. A samurai child who cried out in pain, who flinched visibly, who showed fear in front of others, wasn't just scolded for being childish, he was being corrected for a flaw that could one day cost his entire family its honor. Emotional control wasn't a personality trait, it was training, drilled in the same deliberate way as swordsmanship, because in an honor culture, your face, your posture, and your silence were just as much a weapon as your blade. Think about your own life for a second. When was the last time your reputation felt genuinely fragile? Maybe it wasn't during some dramatic crisis, maybe it was during an ordinary week, when a comment online, a missed message, or one awkward moment at work made you replay it in your head for hours afterward, long after everyone else had already forgotten it. Psychologists studying honor cultures today have found something striking. Even in modern societies without swords, without ritual suicide, without any of the formal ceremony, people raised in honor-based environments show measurably stronger physiological stress responses to insults and public embarrassment than people raised in cultures built more around individual guilt. Your body still reacts as if reputation were survival itself, because for most of human history, it actually was survival. Losing your community's trust could mean losing food, losing protection, losing your place to belong entirely. The samurai simply took that ancient, universal human instinct and turned it into a formal, ritualized code, refined over centuries into something almost unbearably precise. So when a samurai chose seppuku over dishonor, he wasn't acting irrationally by the standards of his own world, however strange it looks from the outside today. He was following the exact same instinct that makes your chest tighten before a difficult conversation, or your face go hot after a mistake in front of colleagues, just carried to its most extreme possible conclusion, refined into ritual and repeated for centuries. The samurai class was formally abolished in 1876, during Japan's rapid modernization under the Meiji government. The swords were surrendered, the formal warrior status disappeared within a single generation, faster than almost anyone alive at the time expected. But the underlying values didn't vanish overnight along with the legal class. Ideas about discipline, self-control, and prioritizing group reputation over individual comfort still shape aspects of Japanese social life today, echoed quietly in workplace culture, in family obligation, in the deep discomfort many people still feel around public failure of any kind. You will probably never kneel in armor, waiting to defend your name with your own life. You will probably never face a blade, or a ritual, or a lord whose survival depended on your courage, but the next time your face goes hot with embarrassment, or you feel that small flicker of dread before admitting a mistake out loud, you're feeling a fragment of the same ancient machinery, not fear of death, fear of how you will be remembered.